Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover, and we have a great show this evening. Lisa Sales is joining us, and Lisa was a part of the leadership team for VARatify ERA. She's also the chair of the Fairfax County Commission for Women. Lisa, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me, Lindsey.
Absolutely. Well, you have been such an advocate and champion for so many incredible things going on in Richmond right now. And so let's start with the ERA. It's so exciting. Virginia is the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Tell us a little bit about how you first got involved in becoming an advocate for the passage of the ERA.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm sort of beaming with excitement and pride right now because we're the 38th and final state. And so that typically means that we would be enshrined in the Constitution and be the 28th Amendment, and that's what we're all working towards. But to answer your question, I was a victim of violence, and at some point I connected my experience with violence as a connection to women's lack of equality in the United States of America. And there really is so much violence against women in America today that we really need a culture change. It's an epidemic, and we do more for the flu. So that connection in my mind, and then getting involved as a result of the violence I experienced and getting engaged in Fairfax County with our Commission for Women and our Council to End Domestic Violence really made me ponder what women experience, not just my personal experience. And I was sent to a National Association of Commissions for Women annual conference, which is going to be right here in Loudoun County in Northern Virginia this year as we celebrate the 100th anniversary year of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. And that was really the first time women appeared in the Constitution. But it was at one of these conferences in my hometown of Los Angeles, of all places, that I learned that I was from a state that ratified the Equal Rights Amendment when I was barely walking. But I was living in a state that had never ratified and hardly considered the Equal Rights Amendment. And when I learned that, I was outraged. I came home on the red eye that morning, and I called a friend of mine and I said, "What? I thought when I met you some years back, you were talking about the need for pay equity in Virginia." And I was always interested in modeling my home state of California and having a pay equity task force. And I can recall being at Senator Warner's Women's Summit in Virginia Beach. And we were holding a banner, and it had Alice Paul in the middle and 78 cents on the dollar. I never registered, even though it said ERA on that very banner, it never registered with me that Virginia hadn't ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. And it had never registered with me that it wasn't a thing. Like most of America, 94%, I think, or more than 90% of Americans think that the Equal Rights Amendment is already enshrined in our Constitution. So needless to say, I came home and hit the ground running and haven't stopped since. And not just me, but many, many advocates across the Commonwealth.
And I'm so glad you haven't stopped running. It's been so important, the work that you're doing for all of us. And I'm the mother of two daughters, and to have them involved in this process and to see the passage this year was just an incredible thing to experience with them. But also explaining to them, hey, it's 2020. And this is just being passed in Virginia, was a hard thing to do. Can you tell us a little bit about the history and why it's been so hard to get momentum behind the passage of the ERA here in Virginia?
Yeah, well, I mean, just you're even speaking about your daughters, this is really for the next generation, for the future of America. I don't know that it's going to help me and you, but it will definitely help the next generation of young women and girls, 160 plus women and girls across the country now. So that's really, really important. You know, Virginia's historically been on the wrong side of history, from interracial marriage to slavery, and just so much more. And 50 years of fighting in Virginia to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, and it was only ever the Senate that ratified it. And you need both chambers to ratify.
Right, right.
So the Senate had ratified it 6 times, but it was never allowed to our House of Delegates to make it out of committee. So men in leadership, frankly, to call it out, 4 or 5 white men in power, kept the bill, buried the bill in committee, and made sure it never saw the light of day. So it would never, even though there was always bipartisan support for it, just as there has been in our Virginia State Senate, they would not let it out from the House floor for democratic debate and discussion. So there it stayed. And unfortunately, we never got any traction in the House of Delegates.
So why was this year different? Tell us a little bit about the incredible work that you and your team did to build coalitions and support and really put the advocacy arm in place to be able to get it passed this year. Tell us a little bit about that effort.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't think ERA in Virginia has seen the likes of the campaign that we put on, women that came together from all across the state, and I have to give a shout out to them, one, because no one person did this, and this is bigger than us all, and it requires us all.
Right.
And we had Delta Sigma Theta sorority, all these lovely African American women out in front helping us, the League of Women Voters, AAUW, so many women and so many women's groups supporting us across the state, really dedicated to making sure that we realize the dream of equal rights for women in America. And even though we were hoping we would be the 36th or 37th state, we are very happy with our place in history to be the historic 38th and final state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, tell us, I know that so many of our viewers probably watched it via live stream or maybe down in Richmond, but tell us what it was like in the chambers, in the gallery, among the people that were there when that gavel went down and you knew the bill had been passed. Tell us what that was like.
Actually, it gives me goosebumps, and I'm probably getting a little emotional and tearing up. But first of all, to have 2 women of color carry the bill in the House of House of Delegates. We're getting to the House of Representatives.
Yes, we will.
The House of Delegates, and then to have our Speaker of the House of Delegates, Speaker Eileen Fillercorn, who's the first woman Speaker of the House in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the first Jewish Speaker of the House and the 8th ever in the United States of America. So that's super poignant, super emotional to see her say, for the women of Virginia, look at me, for the women of Virginia and for the women of America, you know, the Equal Rights Amendment has passed.
It's incredible.
So, and then we all had to come back together for the actual crossover from one chamber to the other last week to do the full ratification so that we could then transmit it to the National Archivist in Washington, D.C. So euphoria, any word I come up to describe what we were experiencing in the gallery would be an understatement. So emotions were high, happiness, tears, shouts of glee, you know, all grabbing each other and hugging each other. Just maybe a little bit of incredulousness too, like, wow, we did it. We actually did it.
Right.
So, and what changed that really is, folks, elections matter.
They do.
So get out and vote because it could possibly be now the reverse of what happened in Virginia and be hung up in our Senate, where also the Violence Against Women Act is unfortunately languishing, which is also a problem.
Right.
So,
and it is emotional when you think about it. I mean, it is for so many of us. I do tear up when we talk about it because it's so long overdue, and it means so much to so many women and young girls. And we're really, as you said before, laying the groundwork for future generations. And I think when we're fighting for equality for us as women, in a sense, we're fighting for everybody. And I think that was the most powerful message that really came out of Richmond is this bill is equality, and that helps everybody.
And that's for everybody. That's men, women, boys, girls, you know, and non-binary people too, right? You don't have to identify man or woman to be equal, right? And to be treated equally. Nobody deserves to be a second-class citizen in this country, and the Equal Rights Amendment can change that. I think it's very important, though, to note that we don't expect the Equal Rights Amendment to be a panacea. It's a foundation. Think of it like when you erect a building, it's the scaffolding. And what's important about laying the foundation or building the scaffolding is that we need to construct new laws and close the loopholes and make it so that equality is actually legalized in a number of laws.
Right, right. And we've talked a little bit about the importance of the passage, especially for future generations. But talk a little bit more about that. What does that mean for our daughters and our granddaughters? What does laying this foundation mean for them 10, 15, 20 years from now? Right,
so, you know, it's the Me Too movement that kind of ushered in this idea of the Equal Rights Amendment still being alive. And as I said when we opened, so many women in America have experienced violence. It's ubiquitous. I don't think our lawmakers, I don't think the women and men in America realize how often this occurs. There are 233,000 women experiencing sexual assault. That's 6+ daily. And then there's 2 to 3 women, depending on the study you read, that actually lose their lives to domestic violence or intimate partner violence. So it's really important, I think, from my perspective. There's so much the Equal Rights Amendment can do, but in particular, it's the protections against violence, sexual harassment in the workplace, pay equity issues, pregnancy discrimination, promotions, and so much more. Unfortunately, it's been my experience and the experience of others that when you experience sexual harassment in the workplace, it's brushed under the rug. Right. Or we say it's not substantiated, right? And so it's hard to substantiate something that's a he said, she said. But when there are witnesses, and those witnesses aren't interviewed, so I think stronger laws is what we need, and the ERA can help us. Absolutely. It lays an incredible, strong foundation for future generations. Well, please stay with us. There is more to come on what's next for the ERA, and we'll continue to talk with Lisa about the important work being done in Richmond. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
There. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance? Because he was a fun guy. What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop. Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Can I tell you another one? So how does a tissue dance? Put a little boogie on it. What's Beethoven's favorite fruit? Banana. What is a boxer's favorite drink? Fruit punch.
Mom, I got it. What are you doing in there?
I got stuck.
Are you a dog?
I wouldn't do that. Have you seen the pliers? Where'd you find those?
It's not your birthday.
Sorry.
Bye, Grandpa.
Bye, Grandpa.
Take care of yourself.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover. We're continuing our conversation with Lisa Sales, who is a part of the leadership team for VARatify ERA, and she's also chair for Fairfax County Commission for Women. Lisa, when we finished the last segment, we were talking about how the ERA really sets a foundation for future generations. Tell us a little bit about what's next. Now that Virginia has become the 38th state, the last state we needed to ratify the ERA, what are the next steps? Where do we go from here?
Well, so we thought the work would be and should be done once Virginia became the 38th and final state, because Article 5 of the Constitution says that once 38 states ratify, it becomes the law of the land. So with every state ratification, it gets transmitted. The resolution that has ratified in both chambers of every legislature in the Union gets transmitted to the National Archivist. It gets published in the Federal Register, and it's supposed to become the law of the land. Now, in the Obama administration, the National Archivist recorded Nevada, the 36th state, and Illinois, the 37th state, but the Trump administration's Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel issued an opinion, but it's just that, an opinion, that says that Virginia will not be recognized as the 38th and final state. And they say there are deadline issues, and our attorneys general are fighting. So each of the last 3 states, Nevada, Illinois, and our Attorney General Mark Herring just filed suit to force the archivist to record Virginia and make it the law of the land.
So just to be clear, the Trump administration made the opinion, if you will, that Virginia would not be recognized as the 38th state. And with that opinion, there's obviously legal avenues, right, that the 3 states can come together and fight that. What does that fight look like?
Well, first of all, it'll be taken up in Congress. There's action now that is scheduled to go to the House floor, House of Representatives floor, the week of February 10th, to vote on lifting the deadline. Some people say that's not necessary at all. We'll take our battle to court because the deadline was unconstitutional to begin with, and when the ERA resolution, the amendment was sent to the states, it did not include that language. That language was included in a preamble to the language of the amendment and not in the amendment itself. And of course, many of us sit around and ask, the very idea of putting a deadline on equality for women is discriminatory in and of itself.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Oh, and also it bears saying that Article 5 does not give any role to the executive, whether he or she be a governor or whether he or she be a president. So for any administration to put their thumb on the scale and issue an opinion is also at best questionable.
Sure, and could be unconstitutional.
Possibly.
Could be. Well, for our viewers that I know have followed this journey of the passage of the ERA, and it is going to be taken up in Congress the 2nd week in February. How can our viewers get involved in this effort to make sure that Virginia is recognized as the 38th state?
Well, first of all, people need to care about Virginia because it's not for Virginia, it's for all of America. Right? Virginia being the final state. So I would say write letters to your attorneys general to jump on board to support ratification. Write to your members of Congress, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and tell them how important this is to you. And children, write to your members and tell them how important it is to you. And the best thing you could do is amplify the message. Even if you're not good at Twitter, you can go to Facebook. Or you can just sign up with an account for Twitter, create a handle, and retweet everything the ERA Coalition puts out there. Everything that I put out there at CA Blue Blaze. Everything that VARatify ERA puts out there. Just retweet. You don't even have to create content. You can comment if you wish, but Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, any place you can comment and create a public uproar. Women will not be beyond starting a revolution in this country to get their equal rights.
That's right.
But I think it takes all of us coming together, supporting each other. It's what we did in Virginia, and it's what we'll continue to do at the national level. Women are not going to give up, and this is going to be a fight.
Right. Well, and you made such an important point, that it's not just women that need to stand up and speak out in Virginia. It's women across the country. And so however we can amplify that message within our communities, our families, through social media, that message needs to get out there, because we do need to create pressure where it's needed. And we all came together for the Women's March across the country and across the world, and I know we can do it again.
Yes, indeed we can. And I think that, if anybody wants a webinar or doesn't understand the Equal Rights Amendment or its impact, its potential impact, then reach out, contact one of us. We would be happy to brief you, to give a presentation, because at times it can seem esoteric, this thing that came into being in the 1970s when many of us either weren't born or were babies. So happy, it's all about education and awareness, and happy to help spread the word.
That's fantastic. Is there a particular website that people can go to, or resources they can go to learn more about it and maybe submit questions and that type of thing?
Absolutely. At VARatify ERA.org, there is an FAQ.
Great.
As well, ERA Coalition, and equal means equal, and Equality Now, to really understand and get a hold of why equality for women in this nation is so important. I realize that we have advanced degrees, and we're doctors, and we're lawyers, and we're presidents and of organizations and chairs of councils. But in the eyes of the law, we are still not equal. And wouldn't it be lovely to have that spelled out in our nation's most fundamental document? And to boot, which is really something to be ashamed of, the United States of America is one of 7 countries that does not have a gender equality clause in their Constitution. How can we be America in 2020 and not have a gender equality clause in our Constitution?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as we're continuing the evening talking about the important work being done in Richmond for women and girls, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the important work you're doing down in Richmond right now, alongside with the ERA work, but to really support and champion SB 479 and HB 1004. Can you tell us about that bill and how it will ultimately help protect many women and girls as well?
Yeah, and so, one of the things I said is it's about strengthening laws and protecting women from discrimination. And when I was sexually assaulted in 2011, I went to get a protective order and realized that under my protective order, my perpetrator didn't have to surrender his firearms. That only if I was the spouse or the girlfriend of the perpetrator would firearms have to be surrendered. And I didn't fall into the legal definition of domestic violence, which is just intimate partner violence. And not to minimize the importance of that and domestic violence, but it didn't make any sense to me that 50% or in excess of 50% of mass shooters have a history of violence against women, have a history of misogyny, and wouldn't necessarily have to surrender their firearms unless it was a case of domestic violence. So about 8 years ago, I contacted my then delegate, now senator, because I was very interested in changing the law so that all violent acts, respondents subject to protective orders, would have to surrender their firearms. If you are a violent recidivist, as a matter of public safety, it doesn't make sense for you to have firearms.
Right. And you have a very personal reason, and I know you and I talked about this as well, and you gave a powerful testimony in front of the Public Safety Committee
and
down in
the
Richmond.
Senate Judiciary.
And Senate Judiciary. And it got a lot of attention because I think it struck a chord in so many of us who have experienced maybe similar things as well. Can you talk a little bit about the passion that really drives the need to ensure that this bill gets passed?
So I don't know that I expected all the attention. I will say that. But as I said, I was sexually assaulted in 2011, and I spent 4 or 5 hours trying to get away from my attacker on my knees. He tried to strangle me. He went after my dog, and he went after my cat. And he was ultimately arrested. And even though he was charged with 2 felonies, he was allowed to plead out to lesser crimes, which is also a problem in America. We allow the perpetrators of violent sexual crimes to plead out to lesser charges. And then while under my protective order, this character tried to shoot a couple drinking coffee in their car. He whipped a gun out of the console of his Mercedes-Benz and attempted to shoot a couple drinking coffee in their car because he wanted their parking space. And so that was so alarming to me. Imagine my surprise learning this from the FBI. The Falls Church Police didn't contact me even though they could see his rap sheet and what had happened, that he was the respondent to a protective order, that he had committed 2 violent felonies, sexual battery and abduct by force, locking me in my own room. And like I said, they didn't notify me. They didn't recover the gun. And he got another plea deal for the brandishing. He got out of his anger management counseling and had to do very little. So I see this as letting bad actors get away with horrible things, and I think we have to have a mind towards changing that as well.
Absolutely, we do. And you know, I mean, the work you've done on this bill has been incredible, and I know it's been a joint effort both in the Senate and the House. Can you give us an update on where this bill is right now?
Sure. Well, I should give credit to Senators Howell, Saslaw, Favola, and Boysko, all of whom have championed this bill in the Senate. And I'm proud to say that it's passed in the Senate. It came out of the Judiciary Committee and I believe went through its 3rd reading on the floor of the Senate. And then same for the House, which was championed by Delegate Mike Mullen. And so it too has passed out of the House, and now we'll go to crossover and hopefully we'll get to see the governor sign this bill into law.
Great. Well, please stay with us. We'll continue our conversation with Lisa about the important work being done for women and girls in Richmond. We'll be right back.
I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's up?
Do we have a gun?
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions.
Love it.
Cross-referencing travel sites. And booking all your flights with those...
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like... Aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I thought I had it under control. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here?
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover, and we're continuing our conversation about the important work being done for women and girls in Richmond. And Lisa Sales is joining us. And Lisa, we've talked the first two segments about the incredible work that's being done in Richmond. One, to ratify the ERA, but also laws are being passed right now to help further protect women and girls. And it's incredible to see that Virginia is really leading the way in so many regards when it comes to that continued fight for equality. Tell us a little bit why you think it's important that Virginia be the one to lead the way.
Well, you know, we often talk about the Virginia way in the Commonwealth, and I would like to see something called the Virginia model, and I would like to see us pass more laws that prohibit discrimination based on gender, and there's no reason why we can't do that. We're now the 38th and final state, as I've said many times before, with such excitement to have ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, and there's nothing to stop us from moving along the spectrum and passing more laws that protect women from, you know, gender-based violence and pay discrimination and sexual harassment, like strengthening trainings for corporations. There are 8 states already that have pushed forward legislation that makes it so that corporations in their states have to have robust sexual harassment training from staff levels all the way up to the C-suite. So I think I would like to see that happen in Virginia, if not this session, the next session. And I think a statistic that many people don't know is that women now exceed 50% of the population in America, and sadly over 70% of women in America women and children are economically insecure. So let's think a moment what that means. The same amount, over 70%, are our nation's poor. So we need to look at laws through that lens, and what I asked our legislators to do and what I'm speaking with them about is if every legislator could pick up one law, look at one statute through the lens of making women more economically secure, we would get there. And that's what I think Virginia can do to be the Virginia model. You know, I'm from California. I went to graduate school in New York City, but I would really, really like to see Virginia, my adopted home state, lead the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we actually have a call. Tony from Falls Church would like to know the important work being done in Richmond. How will it ultimately affect the work being done at a national level? So what does that mean? If Virginia's doing this work at the state level, how can that ultimately impact the work that's being done at the national level?
Right, that's a great question. Thank you for the question. So think about a pilot program, right? If you enact solid legislation without loopholes that can really help women, and you track that legislation to see how it's helping others or preventing violence, for example, or preventing an increase in sexual harassment claims in the workplace, then other states could pick up that successful legislation and implement their own legislation that would impact the constituents in their state as well. And so if we continue to do that and proliferate that throughout the United States of America, we'd get there.
Right.
We'd make it happen.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And while we have spent the evening really talking and celebrating, I feel like we can't say 38 enough, right?
I know. Sorry, everyone.
It's wonderful. Yeah. What does it mean, though? The work that we have left to do is still great, right? It is a foundation for us to really leap from. Let's talk about the work that is still left to do when it comes to important issues about pay equity, about women's health care, about the importance of passing the Violence Against Women Act. Talk a little bit about the work we have left to do here in Virginia, but we as all women have across the country to do.
Right. I think we need to raise our voices. So often It's intimidating in a corporate structure. You're worried you might lose your job if you, make waves or, come clean that you're being sexually harassed or, someone is making fun of the way you dress. Or coming on to you in the workplace, or not giving you attention when you're talking to them. They turn their backs. I had that horrible experience myself. So women really being respected. And so I think some of those things are that companies could be transparent about pay equity, and they can do pay equity audits, much like Salesforce has done.
Sure.
I think all companies should be doing that. I think the law is now, although I'm not sure that it's the law in every state, you cannot ask what a woman or what anybody has made at a prior job. They should only be judged on the merits of their skill set and be given a salary not based on what they were making, especially important for women who were rearing children and are returning to the workforce, but on what they're capable of doing. So that and paid family and medical leave could really be helpful.
Important.
And just really taking sexual harassment in the workplace seriously, because it is not pleasant to have that hanging over your head, knowing that your livelihood is dependent on it. And many people challenge us and say, well, why do you put up with it? Why don't you just leave? Well, when you have a mortgage to pay, maybe you have health issues, you're reliant on that job. It's not so easy just to pick up and find another job.
Right, and I think because of the pressures, right, of providing for your family, for your mortgage, health insurance, there are so many women, unfortunately, that aren't in a position to tell their stories and to speak out. And I think
I'm so glad you brought that up.
So important to talk about the untold stories, right?
Yeah, thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the civic responsibility I feel towards others to raise their voices. They have entrusted me with telling their stories and raising my voice. I only tell my own story of sexual assault, and battery, because I know it has impacted so many other women that are not yet ready to tell their stories. And so I feel a tremendous responsibility to work with other advocates and service providers to get the word out and to make their stories known. And people will say, well, you're privileged, you're educated, you're white. And while that's true, violence doesn't discriminate, but it really impacts the poorer communities and women of color. And so I feel an obligation to do something about that.
Sure, and I think too, realizing how hard it is to tell that story. I told my story a few years ago for the first time, and when it appeared in the Washington Post, it felt like I had been hit in the stomach, because it had been a story that I had tucked away deep down inside.
I don't know
your
story.
For 20 plus years, right? And I think too, telling your story empowers other women to also speak out. And that's one of the best things that we can do for each other, is being that strength to be able to stand on each other's shoulders in this fight, because it is a fight, and it's so important to speak up and to do what we can about it.
Yeah, I don't love telling the story, but I'm going to be fierce and loud and proud if that means that we can change this culture of violence against women in America.
Absolutely, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to be loud. I love Congressman John Lewis always says, speak up, speak out, and get into some good trouble. And I think there's a lot of good trouble women can get into right now in protecting ourselves, but also protecting future generations of women. And there's so much to be done. We've talked a lot about paid maternity leave. We've talked about women's health care. Let's talk more about right now what's happening in Congress with the Domestic Violence and Act Against Women. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because right now, it doesn't look like it could be renewed. Is that?
So I'm going to say this again, elections matter. And the Violence Against Women Act was passed in the House of Representatives, and now it's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk and nothing has been done to make sure that VAWA, V-A-W-A, the Violence Against Women Act, has been passed. And that gives so many protections to women and communities at local levels and frees up money to help women, endure and their kids, to fight through violence and trauma and get counseling and get the help they so desperately need. And let's not forget that violence doesn't just impact the woman who's experiencing it. It impacts families, it impacts children, it impacts communities. And sexual violence alone, sexual assaults, cost this country $3 trillion. I don't think people realize that. And how important it is to really treat this like this silent epidemic it is, and where we can do more about this. I don't understand why this is a partisan issue. And that's the other important thing about the Violence Against Women Act and the Lilly Ledbetter Act.
Right. The Equal Pay Act, sure.
Right, exactly right. If we have an ERA, you're not going to have to worry about the Violence Against Women Act expiring or being rolled back. You're not going to have to worry about the Lilly Ledbetter Act not being enforced, because it isn't being enforced, right? So that is why the Equal Rights Amendment is so important. But we got to do more than that. And we've got to, what I'd really like to see is a sexual violence czar, right? I would like to see a task force set up in our nation to start to bring experts together to solve these very issues. And again, to change this, to dismantle this culture.
Now, there's hard to believe there's critics out there, right? But there are.
Not really, yeah.
What do you say to those critics when you hear, oh, this stuff really doesn't need to get done, women are equal? What would you say to that?
First, I would say if women were equal, we wouldn't have needed the 19th Amendment to ask for the right to vote. I say ask in quotes because we fought. The women whose shoulders we're standing on fought right here at Lorton Workhouse, right? What's now known as Lorton Workhouse. They were force-fed, they were dragged, they were jailed. They fought tooth and nail for the 19th Amendment to be ratified. It's only been 100 years this year that women have had the right to vote. So it's amazing that in the centennial anniversary year, we're also ratified the Equal Rights Amendment in Virginia.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I'm honored to have you on the show tonight. Thank you for the work that you've done, and I know you'll continue to do. So please join in the efforts of this leadership team that's working for all of us.
Hennessy's window. Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We? Go to the door, ask for the ball back.
Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See you, dude. See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Hi. Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. We are continuing our conversation tonight about the incredible work being done for women and girls this session in Richmond. And I'm honored to have with me in our final segment, Holly Seibold, who is the founder and executive director of BRAWS. Thank you so much, Holly, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now start out by telling us about the important work your organization is doing for women and girls in our community.
Oh, great. Thank you for asking. BRAWS was established in 2015 to ensure that women and girls throughout Virginia have access to menstrual supplies and undergarments so that they don't miss school, that they can attend work, participate in extracurricular activities, and pretty much, have the freedom and opportunity to do what they please.
And the work that your organization is doing covers all of Northern Virginia. I mean, you are in the schools that need you the most, really. Can you talk a little bit about how many schools that you're working with across our area?
Yeah, so we're working with thousands of students in about 7 different districts in Northern Virginia, which includes Loudoun County, Fairfax County, Prince William, Arlington, Alexandria, but we also work around the state. We are serving students in Wise, Virginia, which is in Southwest, along with Roanoke, and then we are in the Eastern Shore as well, in Hampton Roads in Norfolk.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so we never say no to a partner who reaches out. We work directly with the schools and shelters, and if there's a need, we're there to fulfill that need.
That's fantastic. And I want you to talk too, because yes, you run this incredible organization that helps so many women and girls, but you are also a fierce advocate down in Richmond. Can you talk about the important work being done, the bills that have been passed to really help with menstrual equality?
Yeah, we provide direct services because there is a need, and that needs to be fulfilled at this point. But at the same time, simultaneously, we need to make sure that we are addressing public policy and making sure that reflects the needs of women and girls, similar to what you were talking about earlier with Lisa. So we want to make sure that our legislators know that this is a critical need, that students have to be able to have access to pads and tampons in order to go to school. Yes, we are providing them, but it's really the responsibility of our elected officials to make sure that that basic need, that critical need is met. So we are working with our legislators, and we have worked with our legislators for the past couple of years, hoping to pass legislation that would require school districts to include a line item in the budget for menstrual supplies. We haven't been able to move past subcommittee in the past, but this year actually we've had progress. Senator Boysko's bill in the Senate has actually passed through to the House, so we're waiting to see what happens. And on the House side, Delegate Mark Heem also had an identical bill, which has moved to the Senate. So we're waiting to see what happens. We actually, in the past, have had opposition through the superintendent's office, the school districts, but this year they did not oppose. So we're actually very, very thankful for that. However, they would like to see support from the state to fund the program.
So right now where we're at is the Senate bill has passed, and then the House bill has passed. So they've now are going to be crossing over. And so we'll wait to see what that looks like. But is there something that our viewers can do? Because while you've gotten over in so many ways the goal line here, it's not a done deal. How can our viewers get involved if they're just learning about this issue and just coming to understand really the importance of it throughout the Commonwealth? How can they get involved?
Just raising awareness and educating people. I mean, that's really a lot of what we do at BRAWS and the volunteers that we work with. This is an issue, but it's something that's not talked about often. And so it's up to those who are aware of the problem to discuss it to anybody who has the power to make change. So we really encourage you to write, viewers to write their school board members, write their state delegates and their state senators, and make sure that they know that this is a problem, but the solution is within reach.
Absolutely. And you brought up a really important point. It's a problem that's not talked about a lot. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know when you first started your organization, I've heard you tell some stories that in many cases, some people were appalled that you were talking about it, right? Tell us a little bit about what that was like, and then too, why it's important that all of us talk about this.
Right. You know, it's just about breaking the stigma. Periods for a long time have just been something that everybody has, every woman, everybody with a uterus has experienced at some point in their life, yet it's something that has never been addressed, even by the most progressive women. It's not something that's normally even included in a lot of feminist platforms. And so by not being able to talk about it, we are restricting our opportunity. We are restricting our success in the future, because if we don't have that education, if we don't have the opportunity, let's say, to participate in swimming or cross country because we don't have access to these products, then we are changing our future, and particularly those who are in high needs areas. Now, this could be a scholarship, this could be a way out of the cycle of poverty that they've experienced, but because we're not talking about it, because they don't want to bring it up, you know, then that's something that is hindering the future of so many of our girls. And so we'd like to see that change. We'd like to see people talk about it and be realistic about the issues and how it's really a barrier to so much of your life.
Right. And I think too, it's hard to put the expectation on young girls to talk about it, right? It's at a time in your life when so many things are changing, you're going through a lot. And if we as adults and legislators and community leaders and activists aren't talking about it and giving them the space and the freedom and the confidence to talk about it, you know, that is a huge problem. And I think we've got to continue to keep that in mind as we're all advocates for this.
Yeah, you know, this year we had a lot of all bipartisan support, actually.
That's
the bills
great.
had passed unanimously. And I think a lot has to do with the students standing up and speaking out. Many of them did come to Richmond and they told their stories about what it's like to get their period in school and how they had to miss a test or they missed the theater performance they were supposed to be in. And they're also writing their school board members, and they're going to the school board meetings and standing up and saying this is not okay and we want to see it changed. And so, yeah, you know, it definitely, the adults need to step in and kind of facilitate this change, but it's also on the students to make sure it happens.
Well, and what powerful change students can bring.
Oh,
I mean,
my
we've
goodness.
seen it on so many issues just in the last few years, whether it's gun violence prevention. There's so many issues where students have led the way and have really created the change that we so desperately have needed as a country.
Their voices are powerful, and I'm so happy to see them standing up and speaking out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, talk a little bit about how our viewers can get involved with the efforts at BRAWS, and do you take donations? Are there opportunities to volunteer? Tell us a little bit about what that help could look like.
Right. Okay. So until our government policies reflect the needs of women and girls, we do have to continue to provide direct services to the schools and to the shelters in the area. And so we need volunteers to help us. We need donations, of course, to purchase the products, but we need help from volunteers to deliver them to the different schools in the area. You know, we need help. We go directly to shelters, and we distribute bras and underwear, which we didn't really talk about too much, but bras are another thing that's a barrier. Bras and underwear, but bras specifically to a girl around 12 or 13. Wow. It's the highest dropout rate in sports because there is an association with when they start developing, they don't have the proper bra, and then they just give up. And so so we provide that to them. And also we provide it to PE teachers to make sure that their students are participating. So at any rate, we deliver those, and we always need volunteers to purchase them and deliver them, go to the shelters, fit women and girls in the proper bras, and provide them the underwear that they need as well. So all of those services are much needed. We have an upcoming event, Mardi Gras, which is February 28th. It's the largest that provides us the largest source of income for the year. We would love for people to come and share in our excitement about this mission, and also, you know, contribute it while having a good time.
So, and tell us again the date.
It's February 28th.
February 28th.
At Westwood Country Club. It's at 8 o'clock at night, so it's more like a fun party. We have a DJ.
Yes, of course.
But yeah, so it's a great opportunity to help and support our mission, but also, you know, have a good time at the same time.
Wonderful.
So that would be really great to have.
Where can our viewers go to purchase tickets?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Yes, on our website at BRAWS.org, BRAWS.org. And they could also find us on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I know you're constantly taking donations.
Oh, yes, of course.
Tell us what donations that you all are accepting.
Right. So we also accept in-kind donations. So we would love to receive pads, specifically pads for the school-age students. They like to, they prefer that over tampons. We always need sports bras. We're always out of sports bras, and underwear for children. We are out of that. That is something that goes by very quickly.
Wow.
Lots of families are homeless, which is what not. That is not the stereotype, but it is true that the number one demographic is children. And so when we provide the underwear, they go very quickly. So if people would like to donate underwear, that will make a huge impact as well.
That's great. So
yeah,
bras, sports bras, underwear, pads are primarily what you're taking donations.
Exactly. But we'll take anything as long as it's new and has a tag on it and it's unopened.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And your website, again, because I think this is so important
Thank
that
you.
we all work to pitch in to
Thank
help
you.
solve this issue, especially you know, until our legislature and our local governments do.
Right.
So tell us again your website.
It's BRAWS.org, BRAWS.org.
Well, fantastic. And I know you're continuing the work in Richmond, and we will keep a close watch on the crossover, the bills that are coming forth. Is there something our viewers can do to make sure their voice is heard in that crossover?
You know, contact your legislators. We also have another bill that we didn't get a chance to talk about, but I'll just briefly mention it. It's about, we've been trying for years to remove the tax on menstrual supplies like pads and tampons and panty liners, because it's an extra burden that those who are already in crisis don't need to necessarily experience. So last year we were able to get it down to 2.5%. This year we would like to see it gone completely. Yes, and so that bill is actually today passed through the Senate.
Congratulations.
Yes, we're excited, but the stipulation is that it needs to be funded, and it's currently not in the governor's budget. So we are requesting that those who advocate on this cause contact the governor and let him know that this is an important piece of legislation.
Fantastic. So in order to have our voices heard, we need to contact the governor on this particular piece of legislation. Please go and donate and join us at the Mardi Gras event. Thank you so much for being with us tonight for this important conversation about women and girls. Good night.